Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. We have just learned where the president is tonight. We had known that the president was going to a dinner in a private home tonight, somewhere in the D.C. area. He hasn't done all that many of these since becoming president. When he leaves the White House, he tends to go to one of his own private properties somewhere, or his D.C. hotel, for example. But the White House today emphasized that the president would be leaving the White House to go to a dinner with supporters. He's done a couple of these now in the last 2 weeks. The White House went out of its way to say this is not a fundraising dinner. And so we've been wondering where he was going to be. Well, the New York Times reports tonight that the dinner is at the home of Giuseppe, I think you pronounce his last name Cecchi. It's C-E-C-C-H-I. It's either Secchi or Cecchi. He's described as a Trump loyalist. But just because history is a dog that not only chases its tail, it catches it and bites hard, the New York Times further reports tonight, helpfully, that Giuseppe Cecchi at one point was known as the condo king of Washington. Among his most famous achievements in business was that he was the developer of the Watergate complex. Yes, that Watergate complex. The president holding a private dinner tonight with the guy who built Watergate. You can see the president's dinner host here at work on the future Watergate building. So that's the puppy's tail in the news tonight. Biting onto it is something else in the news at this hour. I think we should have expected this to happen at some point. I don't know why it happened today in particular, but I'm very, very curious about it. And we have to go to Watergate in order to make sense of what's happening tonight. This was the front page of the New York Times on Sunday, October 21st, 1973. You see the big banner headline there across all 8 columns of the front page. 3 big lines of all capital letters. So much happening that was so important that the freaking headline had not 1 but 2 semicolons in the headline. Quote, Nixon discharges Cox for defiance, semicolon. Abolishes Watergate task force, semicolon. Richardson and Ruckelshaus out. This was, of course, the Sunday morning after the Saturday Night Massacre. And we've all memorized by now, right, what happened in the Saturday Night Massacre. The Watergate special prosecutor was closing in on Nixon, specifically closing in on getting the Oval Office tapes from Nixon. Nixon freaked out and ordered that the Watergate special prosecutor should be fired. He told the Attorney General to fire the Watergate special prosecutor. The Attorney General said no and resigned. That's him on the left side of your screen. Then with the Attorney General out of the way, Nixon went on to the next man in the line of succession, the Deputy Attorney General, William Ruckelshaus, on the right side of your screen. Mr. Ruckelshaus, too, said he would not carry out the president's order to fire the Watergate special prosecutor, and he, too, resigned as Deputy Attorney General. And so then the president had to keep chewing his way through the upper ranks of the Justice Department till he found the guy who was the third down the line of succession, and he agreed to do it. The Solicitor General, Robert Bork, finally said, okay, yeah, he would fire the special prosecutor. But by then, this was such a conflagration in Washington that Saturday night, by the next morning, it was earning double semicolon headlines across 8 columns of print, and the whole country had its hair on fire about Nixon's behavior. And frankly, after the Saturday Night Massacre, politically and in terms of this scandal, he never recovered. But, you know, that did not happen by happenstance. It wasn't an accident of circumstance or a personality quirk that led Elliot Richardson and William Ruckelshaus to resign in protest when Nixon ordered them to fire the Watergate prosecutor. Now, Richardson and Ruckelshaus did that. They said, no, sir, I will resign instead. They did that because somebody thought ahead. Go back to that big front page again. Big headline, summing up all the big news across the top of the page. But then look a little bit further down the page. Look at this article. This is the article that actually explains the third line of the big headline. It explains why the Attorney General, Richardson, said, no, Mr. President, if you're going to order me to fire that prosecutor, I'm going to quit in protest. And then you see the subheadline there, the explanation. Attorney General says he couldn't oust prosecutor, cites autonomy vow. What's the autonomy vow? Aha! Turns out to be very important. Elliot L. Richardson resigned as Attorney General tonight, saying he could not carry out President Nixon's order to discharge Archibald Cox, the special Watergate prosecutor, in light of his earlier pledge to provide Mr. Cox with full authority to contest presidential claims of executive privilege. During his confirmation hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Richardson promised that the special prosecutor would have unimpeded authority to subpoena potential evidence from any source, including the president himself. Elliot Richardson insisted that he would not countermand or interfere with the special prosecutor's decisions or actions, and he promised that the special prosecutor would not be dismissed from his post except for extraordinary improprieties on his part. If there weren't extraordinary improprieties, he wasn't going to fire that guy. So that's what Elliot Richardson had to promise in order to get confirmed as Attorney General. He was nominated to be Attorney General in the middle of the Watergate scandal. The previous Attorney General who he replaced ended up going to prison on perjury and obstruction of justice charges related to Watergate. Nixon ousted that previous Attorney General on the same day he ousted John Dean and H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman, all of whom would also end up going to prison for Watergate. So when those guys were being pushed out and they're trying to bring in a new Attorney General, it comes time for the Senate to confirm this new Attorney General in the middle of the Watergate scandal. And yeah, they were thinking ahead that there might be a problem in the Nixon administration. And so they obtain that promise from him under oath as part of his confirmation proceedings. He promised that he would not fire the Watergate special prosecutor unless there were extraordinary improprieties on the part of that prosecutor. They got that promise from the Attorney General. And then when the new Deputy Attorney General was nominated and confirmed, Bill Ruckelshaus, the Senate extracted that same exact promise from him. He, too, promised that he would not fire the Watergate special prosecutor unless there were extraordinary improprieties. Well, you know, there weren't extraordinary improprieties on the part of that prosecutor. Dude just subpoenaed the White House tapes, which was pushy, but not an extraordinary impropriety, especially given that the subpoena is held up in court. So when Nixon nevertheless told his new Attorney General that he should fire the prosecutor for going after the White House tapes, the Attorney General said no. It was only earlier that year that he had promised that he wouldn't fire the guy except in extraordinary circumstances. He basically was able to tell the president, listen, I made a public promise that I wouldn't do exactly what you're asking me to do, and so I'm not going to do it. I'll resign instead. And then the Deputy Attorney General basically had to say the same thing. I made a public promise that I wouldn't do that except in extreme circumstances. These aren't extreme circumstances. So if you're telling me to fire the guy anyway, I made a public promise that I wouldn't do that, so I'll quit too. That's why the Saturday Night Massacre happened the way it did. It wasn't just the goodness of their hearts, wasn't just stoic civic virtue by these two Justice Department officials, Richardson and Ruckelshaus. I mean, at least it wasn't that alone. It was also key. It was instrumental. It was how they explained their behavior at the time, both to the public, to the press, and to the president. They'd made a promise publicly because somebody thought ahead to ask them to make that promise before push came to shove. So because we have that history, I think we should have expected this to happen at some point. But now tonight it has, and I'm curious as to why it's happened tonight. 9 Democrats in the Senate Judiciary Committee have just written to the whole line of succession at the U.S. Justice Department, asking 5 officials in the line of succession to make the same kind of commitment to protect the Mueller investigation in the Russia scandal that Elliot Richardson and William Ruckelshaus did to protect the Watergate prosecutor back in 1973. The person at the Justice Department who oversees the Mueller investigation is, of course, Rod Rosenstein. He has already made this kind of public commitment.
If you were ordered today to fire Mr. Mueller, what would you do?
As I've explained previously, I would follow the regulation. If there were good cause, I would act. If there were no good cause, I would not.
If there were no good cause, I would not act. I would not follow that order. So Rod Rosenstein is already first in the line of succession. He's overseeing the Mueller inquiry. He has made this kind of public commitment that he will not fire Robert Mueller unless there's good cause to do so. Well, If the president fires Rod Rosenstein, though, the line of succession in terms of oversight of the Mueller investigation would go from him to the Solicitor General, Noel Francisco, and then to the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel, Stephen Engel, and then to the head of the National Security Division of the Justice Department, John Demers, and then it would go to two specific U.S. attorneys. First, the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of North Carolina, who is Bobby Higdon, and then to another U.S. attorney in Texas, Aaron Neely Cox. I think no relation to Archibald Cox, although I should probably check. These 9 senators tonight have now written to this whole line of succession. At the Saturday Night Massacre, you had to go through 3. Well, in this case, it's written to all 5 below Rosenstein: Francisco, Engel, Demers, Higdon, Cox. And this is what they said, quote, "We have significant concerns that the president or his White House could order individuals at the Department of Justice with the authority to oversee Special Counsel Mueller's probe to interfere with the probe or shut it down. You fall in the line of succession at the Department of Justice if Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein were to either resign or be removed. We write now to request that you provide a written and public commitment that you will not interfere in the special counsel's investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 elections, possible collusion with such meddling by the Trump campaign, efforts to obstruct justice, or any related inquiry. As such, we ask that you publicly commit to refuse any order or request, whether express or implied, to interfere in the special counsel's investigation, including but not limited to firing Mr. Mueller, cutting off funding or resources, limiting staffing, or inhibiting his ability to follow the facts wherever they may lead." So again, that letter is being sent out tonight from Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And they're saying that they want a response right away. So far, there's no word from these 5 senior Justice Department officials as to whether they will make that kind of commitment, whether they'll make that kind of promise. It is worth noting that the man above them at DOJ, who's in that oversight position now, Rod Rosenstein, he has made that kind of public promise. So it wouldn't be weird if these other officials followed in his footsteps and did so as well. But we'll have to wait over the next few days to see if they think they ought to make this kind of promise. It's very interesting. Imagine being in their shoes right now, right? Knowing this history, knowing the way the president has talked about this special counsel, knowing the way he's railed against the attorney general for recusing himself and against Rod Rosenstein even for his oversight of it, the way he started to rail against Mueller. Again, knowing the history of the Saturday Night Massacre, knowing how Richardson and Ruckelshaus are viewed in history versus how Robert Bork is viewed in history because he was the guy who said, yeah, I'll fire him. I mean, imagine being one of those Justice Department officials tonight facing this letter from these 9 senators saying, should I make the promise? Other thing I'm curious about is why these senators felt compelled to send this letter today, requesting this promise. I am interested in that particularly because only about 90 minutes before this letter went out tonight, we also, out of the blue, got this. Right before that letter to all these Justice Department officials, we also unexpectedly got this joint bipartisan statement from Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons and Republican North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis. They released this tonight without any warning. Quote, "We've heard from constituents, Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike, who agree that Special Counsel Robert Mueller should be able to conduct his investigation without interference. This should not be a partisan issue. We introduced the Special Counsel Integrity Act because we believe that the American people should have confidence in the Department of Justice's ability to conduct independent investigations and its commitment to the rule of law. We urge President Trump to allow the Special Counsel to complete his work without impediment, which is in the best interest of the American people, the president, and our nation." Okay, good to know. That Special Counsel Integrity Act they referenced there is, in fact, bipartisan legislation that Chris Coons and Tom Tillis introduced a while back to protect the Mueller investigation itself in case the president tries to kill it off. That legislation has not gone anywhere because Republican leadership in the Senate hasn't led it. So maybe this unexpected joint statement tonight from these 2 senators is just an effort to put a new spotlight on their old bill that's still kicking around that hasn't been acted on. But I'm curious, why now? Why tonight? And why less than 2 hours later did we get this "we need some promises here" letter going out to the whole line of succession at the Justice Department? I don't know why both of those things just happened tonight, but I am about to get to ask somebody who should probably know. Joining us now is Senator Richard Blumenthal, member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who signed that letter calling for Justice Department officials to commit publicly that they won't interfere in the special counsel's investigation. I should tell you, he also co-wrote an op-ed for Slate tonight, along with historian Rick Perlstein, called How to Protect the Mueller Investigation, which explicitly calls out those parallels to what happened in October 1973. That does feel like quite a curtain opener for what we're seeing right now. Senator Blumenthal, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'm not suspicious, but I'm curious as to why you and these other 8 senators on the Judiciary Committee have sought these assurances from the Justice Department tonight, particularly given that we also saw this interesting statement tonight from Senator Coons and Senator Tillis on a similar matter.
The reason I led this letter was my increasing alarm about swirling reports, unconfirmed and unspecific, but more and more concerning that the president may attempt to fire Bob Mueller. He tried it last June, and he stopped only because his White House counsel threatened to resign. Now his legal team is disintegrating, including the possible departure of that White House counsel. The departure already of one of his lawyers, and his tweets are increasingly erratic and extreme. But most fundamentally is the fact that the investigation is coming closer and closer to Donald Trump himself. He may well be interviewed shortly. There are 3 guilty pleas of witnesses potentially against him with very relevant and important information that could incriminate him. There's a credible case of obstruction of justice right now against the President of the United States, and that case becomes more and more compelling every day. In fact, the President's actions themselves are creating that case, unfolding in real time right before us. So this letter, with Congress now out of town and therefore unavailable to take action, is meant to send a warning, but also to elicit the commitment of these 5 officials who are in line of succession to Rod Rosenstein that they will not fire Bob Mueller or interfere in this investigation by limiting staffing, cutting resources, constraining in any way his ability to follow the facts and the law.
I'm struck by the fact that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has given those sorts of he has given that public assurance more or less. He's told Congress on several different occasions that he will strictly follow the special counsel regulations, that he would not follow an order to fire Bob Mueller if there weren't good cause for that order to have been issued. Given the fact that he's already made public assurances related to this matter, has the Justice Department or any of the individual Justice Department officials who you've now approached, have they given you any indication as to whether they would see it as appropriate or inappropriate, whether they plan to address your concerns through any public statements?
They've given no indication whatsoever, which is also a reason for alarm, because it is very uncomplicated. There's nothing particularly elaborate or challenging about adhering to the rule of law. And I'm alarmed as well by the Republican leadership blocking these bills. There's strong bipartisan support for the bills that I have introduced, as well as Senator Coons and Tillis. Democrats have supported it. Senator Graham, a Republican of South Carolina. And so I think that there ought to be a hearing. In fact, there ought to be votes in the Judiciary Committee that approve this legislation, bring it to the floor, allow us to vote on it, and dispel a lot of the concern that there may be that we will be too late and the president will have acted and we will have this constitutional conflagration unnecessarily. But in the meantime, the pledge from these 5 officials in line of succession to Rod Rosenstein are very, very important, and they've given no indication about what they will do.
Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut from the Senate Judiciary Committee spearheading this overture to the Justice Department tonight. Thank you, sir, and thank you for helping us understand the way you're thinking ahead on this. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, we've got lots more to get to. It's been a busy news day and a busy news night. Stay with us.